question and the beliefs that shape our world.
16 minutes to 2 o'clock, time for our Belief Matters feature. And today we are talking about your rights as an employee regarding religious holidays. So don't be confused like, hey, why is there a lawyer? Why is there a legal advisor coming in for Belief Matters feature? Because we are talking specifically around religious holidays. And I also think that this is such a significant conversation considering the one we had prior. But we take your questions on 011-883-0702 and the WhatsApp line 072-702-1702. And we're joined by Faith Mashapa, legal advisor at Strata-g or Strata-g rather, Labor Solutions. Faith, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Faith, I want to quickly ask you a question based on a conversation we all had together. But basically, post-Easter weekend, I asked a simple question, which was, is South Africa a secular state? Because my understanding is that it is. Yet there are two Christian holidays that are observed that become public holidays, and what we think about that in relation to other religions. And many people gave their feedback, some saying, look, it might not be an official holiday, but I have Jewish or Muslim team members who the boss gives them off. And all of those types of things. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Many people contributed, some saying, actually, to keep things fair, there should be no religious holidays. People must go and negotiate their own things with their bosses, while others said, well, we are majority Christians, so it is fair. I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
So ultimately, it generally just depends on how the state decides to then issue the public holiday. So unfortunately, unless the president gives us an opportunity to all discuss which holidays, in terms of religious holidays, will be granted as an official public holiday, we just get to observe the calendar that has been provided to us by the president. So that's how the matter currently stands in terms of religious holidays and which ones are dictated to as an official public holiday.
Okay, so from a in terms of being an employee and your rights regarding religious holidays, what is the current status with regards to religious holidays?
So in terms of our South African laws, it's very quiet in terms of whether or not anything regarding religious holidays. So there isn't a specific law that someone can turn to that dictates how a religious holiday is going to work for employees. However, this then means that if you're aware that you're having a religious holiday coming up, like Diwali, or you've got Ramadan, then you generally know in advance when those religious holidays are coming up, and then you have to then apply for leave in advance or follow your company's policy.
So one of the big questions I asked, hence I was saying, maybe there is a level of unfairness to the fact that there are allocated Christian holidays, is what that means for the type of leave you are taking out. So now, like you mentioned, that a person would apply in advance. Some environments are very corporate and very strict, where they might say you can choose to take it as annual leave or personal leave, whereas other environments are very chilled. You have bosses who actually sit and try and work something out with you, or say take all the time that you need, or they're willing to even shift working hours to accommodate people's beliefs. In terms then of what that means for your allocated leave days, where should certain things be allocated to? Because if a person comes and says, you know what, Faith, I go to my boss and I say, I actually don't observe Easter weekend. Can I rather come into work on those days and then rather save the 2 days I would have taken for when it is time for me to observe my religious holidays?
So there's a very specific thing that we then need to address. Because the Easter holidays are generally considered as public holidays, those holidays are granted to you in terms of your calendar. So those ones are generally, unless you're required to work on those days, they are your normal working days, then you can work on those days. However, if you're not generally required to work on those days, then you are required to take them as a public holiday, as you would observe perhaps a Freedom Day or a Women's Day. However, if you do have other religious holidays that you believe in and that you would like to observe, what you can do is perhaps speak to management and have an agreement in place where you can swap shifts with someone else who doesn't observe those holidays, and then you would then get that day off to observe your religious holiday, while that employee would then take that time to cover your shift. So ultimately, all of this would then be dictated to by the contract that you signed and also the specific leave policy that is applicable in each business.
Okay, when it comes to, we're referring to religious holidays right now, but we live in such a diverse country with various cultural and spiritual belief systems. In terms of when we speak about religious holidays, from a legal perspective, what is included there? Can a person needing to go and perform a cultural ritual see that within that space? Is spirituality also considered in this category of what we're speaking about?
When you are going to apply for a leave for anything, you would then have to motivate the reason why you're going to do something like that. So if you are, for example, participating in a spiritual ritual or a traditional ritual, you would then need to state with sufficient particularity for the business to understand why you can't avail yourself to work on those particular days. But when we generally speak on religious holidays, we're then looking at the religious groups. So you would look at the Jewish holiday calendar, the Muslim calendar as well. We then have the Indians who would also have their own religious holidays that they would then need to observe. So that is generally what we then look at specifically when we're looking at religious holidays. That doesn't, however, preclude an employee from approaching their manager to discuss with them whether they can be accommodated.
I got you. So now let's say, hypothetically, an employee requests for leave for a religious holiday, and it could be one of the big, well-recognized ones or not so big, but this is declined, and the person really wants to take it. What options are available to them?
So if your leave is declined, then you would be provided with those reasons why your leave is declined. More often than not, your leave would be declined because the business needs require you to be available. However, you can't then just decide that I want to participate in this holiday, so therefore I'm going to go ahead and not come to work. Because if you do that, then you would be considered as being absent without authorization, and then the company would have the ability to then put you through any disciplinary action that is compliant with their disciplinary code and their policies. So if the company is then declining your leave for whatever reason, you are able to then just go ahead and speak to your management again to then try and address why your leave is being declined and to see if there are alternatives that you guys can look at together to try and make sure that everyone is accommodated.
Okay, and then just in terms of if there's any type of disciplinary action or dismissal that comes into play because a person went on unapproved leave, irrelevant of whether they were trying to take it from annual, but the fact that they did not get permission to do it, what is the recourse available?
So if an employee feels that the reason for their dismissal was unfair, right? So they took leave, they applied for leave, that leave was declined with reason, and then they decided, I'm still going to observe. The company then decides we're going to put this employee through the disciplinary process, and then they're subsequently dismissed. There is recourse available for that employee in circumstances where they believe that that dismissal was unfair, in that they can approach a CCMA or the respective bargaining council that is responsible for that particular industry. And then they would then have to follow that dispute resolution process that is available to them.
Okay, that makes complete sense just in terms of how you have shared and explained it all. If now we come back to some of the challenges within our labor law around religion, is there anything you're able to share with us before we open the lines on 011 883 0702 and the WhatsApp line 072702? Because we do know that our legal system is constantly changing. Are there some issues that are currently, being looked at in regards to a leave for religious reasons?
So there is always developing case law that then tells us when we've got judges that are sitting and looking at matters and trying to determine how more inclusive we can be in terms of how we apply the law to allow that everyone feels accommodated and included therein. So it's always good, for at least for us as experts, to always have a look at the law in terms of what the judges are saying, and judges are very clear in terms of that, the fact that if a company has a specific policy in place, it's important for employees to follow those policies. But they're also clear in saying that when implementing policies, it is always a good idea to sit with your staff and engage in discussions with them to see how best you can make sure that your policy covers everyone. That's the thing that you need to be mindful of. So the law is ever changing, and we will see maybe one day we'll have more religious holidays being included as public holidays, but as it currently stands, that is still in the prerogative of legislation and the president.
All right, we're opening up the lines. We've got Larry from Lenasia. Larry, go ahead.
I mean, how are you? Once again, very good program.
Thank you.
I think your person you got there is raising some valid points, right? But South Africa being a secular state, okay. Firstly, let's take it from there. So we all can believe in what we want to believe, right? We do understand economic factors that might impact work side, where we all can't just get holidays the way we want to. But then the question comes in, right? Like Department of Labor would want certain health regulations and everything to be in place in your policies, right? Why can religious holidays not be taken into account there to cater for it, right? I'm not saying everybody will celebrate Eid. I'm not saying everybody will celebrate Deepavali. I'm not saying that, okay, or Kartike Deepam. But the point that we want to make is that how do we then encourage employees, state employees, private sector, to start having that in policies to say that, they should be lenient and sensitive towards that. That's my question to you, Devoshina.
All right, Faith?
So in these type of discussions, like I said, if we're going to be implementing a policy or we're drafting a revised policy, the best way for an employer to go about it is to sit with its staff, conduct research to find out what the best thing they can do to make sure that their staff is accommodated and well taken care of. So this shouldn't just feel like a unilateral decision by the company to say, this is what we want to do. Ultimately, the business wants to be able to run and make a profit as it has been established, but we also want to make sure that its employees are also happy and satisfied. And the only way we can ensure that everyone is satisfied is for us to sit and engage with each other and figure out the best way possible. It is also very true and important for us to note that at the end of the day, there are powers that be, and they would then need to make the decision that they feel is best for their business, taking into consideration their employees. And the obligation that exists on our employers is to make sure that when they're making these decisions, they are compliant with all the labor laws and South African laws that dictate to them what they can and cannot do. So there's nothing that prevents an employer from implementing a policy that specifically deals with other religious holidays that are not considered public holidays, and then to come up with a structure that works for them.
Faith, just in terms then of, companies, workplace, employers, what would you advise they can do to support religious diversity and, limit or just completely avoid discrimination just based on religious beliefs?
So the best way an employer can accommodate religious beliefs is to at least go about making available a room, a quiet place for them if they need to pray, encourage socials where we're teaching each other about our religious beliefs, so that everyone is then aware of why everyone does what they do. Unfortunately, we don't know what we don't know. So if we don't come together and we teach each other, then we don't know what to do. But it's also very possible for them to contact us at Strata-g Labor Solutions, and we can assist them with drafting policies that then encourage inclusivity and limit discrimination. So the more you talk and the more you engage with your staff, the better knowledge you have and the better you're able to accommodate your staff. But it's always good to make sure that you have activities that allow for people to express and to follow their religious beliefs, given the fact that our Constitution allows us to practice the beliefs that we would like to.
And of course, Faith, nobody is obliged to disclose what their religious beliefs are either.
No one is allowed to. No one is obliged to, rather. You don't have to if you don't want to, and no one can force you to do so. It pretty much works exactly the same as your medical records. If you don't want to disclose the full extent of that, you're not required to disclose the full detail.
Faith, thank you so much for your time on 702 Afternoons in our Belief Matters feature. We truly appreciate it. In the next hour of the show, it's our consumer rights feature with Wendy Nola. Nola knows. Get your questions in early. It's 2:00.